rely on the internet to do recordings. I do it all from my machine. Internet's pretty flaky, right? So this talk is called Advanced Pizza Making, the Art of Doing Brick Oven Style. Welcome. If you weren't expecting that, you may be in the wrong place. I'm not sure. No, we're actually here to talk a little bit about Drupal 8, security tips and tricks. You are at the NERDSummit, believe it or not. Nice little event up here in New England. Beautiful. I just ask one small favor for this talk. This is from experience. I will ask you please to hold all questions to the end because I have a lot of stuff that I want to get through. I promise you I will answer your questions, or the questions may be answered throughout the talk. This has been revamped multiple times. My name is Nerdstein. I also go by Adam, whatever your druthers. I'm the Associate Director of Engineering at Civic Actions. I have a Master's of Science in Information Systems and Security from Penn State University, and I'm the Drupal 8 co-maintainer of many different modules, services, taxonomy menu, password policy, key encrypt, file encrypt, field encrypt, pub key encrypt, and many more. New England, you all are gritty as hell. You know that? You really are. You guys are like a little bit of sandpaper, but you're cool people. You know, just kind of mix them together. I'm not, yeah, Pennsylvania, we're definitely a little different over there. You've got Mr. Tom Brady, recent Super Bowl champ. The dude's got so much grit, man. He's like suspended for the first, whatever games of the season, comes back. He's totally crazy. But I'm really disappointed that, the Patriots knocked off my Steelers. Just, a little bitter about that. And you've got this guy, okay? Now, there is no question that this man brings grit, okay? Watching him yesterday in his talk, holy crap. What a balance of being super principled and that sandpaper that we talked about. Oh my God. So, why am I here today? Well, I am here because I want to tell you that as a community, we need folks like you. We need that grit. And we need that grit because we solve big problems in the world. We do. And you have many people in the community that are here today that are wonderful contributors to the world. I've put up some pictures of some folks here. Some of them are sitting back there. So definitely take advantage of these community people that came to attend this event. They've got great experience in many very different things. So definitely say hi, catch up, and share some thoughts with them. All right, a little bit of an introduction here for the talk. First and foremost, Drupal 8 is only 1.5 years old. It's only 1.5 years old. It's practically a baby. So imagine, you hear all these good things about it and some things maybe that aren't so great, but imagine where it can be. So Drupal 7 is, 6 years old now? 7 years old? Something like that, right? Imagine what Drupal 8 is going to look like when it's that old. That's insane. So it's got a crazy amount of potential, and I think the future is looking good. What is the other point of this talk? First and foremost, security is super hard. It is a hard problem. It is not an easy problem. It changes all the time. The attack vectors change constantly, and the solutions themselves are constantly evolving right in the mix, and you have to secure everything. You can't just secure your Drupal app. You can't just secure your infrastructure. You have to secure your people too. That's the hardest part, right? And of course, when you apply solutions, people get kind of crabby because 9 times out of 10, if it's harder for a person to use a system, it's actually more secure. So there's a direct correlation between usability and improving security. And the two often don't mix. So it is extremely hard for you to keep your users happy and make them really secure. Stinks. But the key here in this talk, I do cover a lot of ground about different solutions that you can look at and evaluate and use. But the really critical thing is for you all to understand what problems that you want to solve. Don't just go off and install every module that's on my slide deck or whatever. That's not going to get you what you want. You have to make sure that you take a look at every single system or tool that you have and consider that very carefully and selectively. All right, so let's do a bit of an overview. What are we going to look at? First, we're going to take a look at core. We're going to discuss some hardening techniques. We're going to look at auditing, authentication, encryption, DevOps, the environment that hosts Drupal and around it, and then we'll take some questions. Drupal core. So Drupal 8 core has many new features that impact security. I'm kind of a fan. Let's evaluate a few. First and foremost is Twig. So Twig is the brand new templating system that is built, replaced the Drupal 7 one that you could put whatever crazy DB queries in your template files. There you go, Al. That whatever you wanted to do inside of your template files was insane. So we've restricted all of that down to using a specific language for doing the rendering inside of templates called Twig. And there's many cool things about Twig that we like in the security space. First and foremost, there's auto escaping of any variable that is passed to a template. You don't need to code it, right? It's going to do it for you. In fact, if you want to avoid it, you have to code it, which is exactly what we like in the security space. The next thing is there is no custom PHP in templates whatsoever. There's none. So you pretty much use Twig the way that it's supposed to be used, and you're good. There are a couple little hacky things you can do, but you really have to make an effort to try to get around it, which is it's kind of nice in this case. PHP input filter. Who uses this in Drupal 7 land? Okay, you will get your lashings later. All right. PHP filter was removed from core, and it's one of these things, right? Like we really need to stop doing this as a community. We need to stop leveraging this practice or the way that we can introduce, trying to build a node and you can write custom PHP inside of it. That is like lunacy. The amount of things that you can do and screw up by putting that tool in the hands of your content editors, I can't even imagine. Bad smells are bad for business, okay? Period. And this reeks. So never use it. Just never do it. And because now this isn't in core, this pretty much, in theory, eliminates all vulnerabilities that could be entered by someone typing in some crazy PHP onto your little node, right? Oy. Bad. All right, trusted hosts. So the really great thing now is Drupal in core has a new feature for trusted hosts that you can assign a specific domain to your Drupal site, and it now has the context of knowing, oh, I should be this, which is awesome because now it can also mediate requests that it says you're not that, and it can reject them or it can block them. It can do all these different types of behaviors and activities for security that basically allow Drupal to be more proactive about knowing what it should respond to or what it shouldn't. New development constructs. This is kind of one that maybe one could argue this doesn't directly impact security, but I have a pretty good story to tell, and I think I follow through with that later, so bear with me. Plugin systems. In Drupal 8, any module can develop their own plugin system that they want. And this system allows, or this API I should call it, allows any module to have any other module extend a behavior. So instead of having these 3 options, I can have a 4th option that is my custom case, right? Or it allows other contributed modules to build or extend the plugins of other modules. Pretty cool. So basically what this affords is now tools can be extended in many more diverse ways and customized for your needs, which is pretty awesome. All right, the next deal, Composer. The great thing about Composer really is this was kind of the big leapfrog of getting the Drupal folks off of the Drupal island. We now have the ability in the Drupal system to bring in any open source project that we want into our Drupal system. And so the great thing about Composer with respect to security is if somebody goes and has a really awesome open source tool that we want to take advantage of, we can bring that in. And now we have a brand new security tool, nice, fancy, and shiny. that is sitting right there with our Drupal site. And by the way, the really cool thing too, in terms of a community, it actually makes us more well-rounded. Instead of you all developing things just for Drupal, you may pick up an open source project, and you may actually want to give back to that too. I would encourage it. All right, so there's tons more that I could cover in the core space. I would actually recommend that you go and read or watch Peter Wolannon's Drupal 8 security talk. He gave it at Drupal North a couple months ago. Really good. It's all core, and it's very comprehensive. And he is definitely a thought leader when it comes to security. Heavy contributor. Cool. So we're going to take a look at Contrib now. And we're going to start exploring some different techniques in that to harden a Drupal system. All right, so what is hardening? Hardening is basically the act of reducing or locking down specific features, which in the security space is called attack vectors. We're going to restrict them or cut them off entirely so that the Drupal system kind of is pared back in a more secure manner. The great thing about this is it does limit vulnerabilities because you are restricting the amount that the Drupal system needs to be secured. So you may be restricting certain functions or features, but more often than not, if they're not business critical, you shouldn't have them on anyways. I love that image, by the way. Press any key to start. Well, I could find the any key. This is exactly why we don't trust users in most instances. They have so many varying levels of education and needs and everything, and they can be so hard to secure and to educate and all of that. So we need to be extremely careful, and most of the solutions that we're going to talk about, really, they impact the user. That's what we're doing. We're making this system more dummy-proof, right? I hate to use that term. They're not dummies. They're not at all. I love our users. They're great. But so what we want to do is we need to acknowledge that any access to a Drupal system is really can be quite dangerous, right? You could change or deface a website. You could do all kinds of things. If they're administrators of the site, you can do all kinds of damage, right? So we know that the user is a really major thing that we want to try to work on here. So all the solutions we're going to talk about today are in Drupal 8 right now. They're up on Drupal.org. Everything is available. Many are modules that I work on or contribute to. So auto log out. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? First, user sessions should be limited to a specific amount of time, right? If it goes past that time, they get logged out. So the auto log out provides that solution. It's configurable, and you could define that by role. So you could say for more trusted users like an administrator, their timeout may be 5 minutes. For less trusted users like just straight content editors that have permissions or lower level permissions, you may want to give them an hour. So you have that ability with this module. Pretty cool. Session limit. Users should only have, say, one open session at a time. If they're trying to log in from their phone or trying to log in from their computer, this module allows you to basically configure by role how many concurrent sessions are available to a user at any given point in time. I usually set this to like 2. There's really no reason to give people, more than one session, really, more than 2 sessions, I should say. Usually their phone and their laptop is good enough. Login security. This one is really a niche use case, but it's a good one if it meets your use case. In this case, authentication should only be from a valid set of administrative IP addresses. And this is really good when you have a network, right? And you can say, I want to only allow logins from this IP range to that IP range. And that's wonderful. And the other nice thing that this one does, it actually locks down the number of attempts that a user can log in. And Drupal core already has a built-in kind of cap, but this makes it more configurable, and it extends those flood control mechanisms as they're called. So the flood control is really useful because if you have a spam bot or something and it's trying to get into your site, it's going to just keep hammering your site and trying to log in over and over and over again. So between core and this module, you have a lot of degrees of flexibility to configure that. SecKit. I generally kind of consider this the like Swiss Army knife. This has a bunch of sort of generic tips and tricks that can impact a lot of different security problems, but this is really just focused on changing response headers. And that can be kind of a powerful thing, believe it or not. If you look at securing things like cross-site scripting, clickjacking, CSRF, and any origin-driven attacks, you want your headers of the requests that go to and from the Drupal system to be better vetted. And so this module allows for that to happen. And it's very easy. It's not a highly technical module. So you can click a few buttons and pick which options you want, click save, and you go on with your day. The honeypot and capture modules, these are the ones that we try to lock down forms by providing kind of ways that robots typically try to submit, and we try to catch them. And so the honeypot module puts in a hidden field on a form as an example, but it doesn't display it. So it's like off the page, right? So only robots who try to fill it out, because humans can't see it, right? If that honeypot is tripped, it's like, you think of who is the Winnie the Pooh, right? He's got his hand in the honey jar. Same idea. And the capture module, you guys are probably all familiar with that. You have to type in, it's a challenge, right? A security challenge. All these things are really good for preventing spam or making sure that you actually are a human. Magic, right? Whoa, we really want to make sure that happens. I love Mari. I used to watch that like way back in the day. I found it so entertaining. All right, cool. So let's take a look at auditing. Does everybody know what auditing is? In the space of auditing, kind of? Okay, well, we'll explore this a bit more. So the role of digital forensics, and Mark's probably pretty decent at this. If you ever get hacked, you want as much data around you and as much information as humanly possible so you could start to put together the pieces of how you got hacked. And these auditing tools basically also allow you, there's another space of auditing, which is doing ongoing and concurrent auditings where you can go and make sure the state of your Drupal system is checked and reported on a regular basis. So you can see if you're evolving with your security and everything like that. And that's good if you're doing a lot of development. So what are some general tips? Okay, first and foremost, never use syslog, bad idea. Never use dblog, I'm sorry. Always use syslog, because syslog puts all of the Drupal information directly onto your operating system in a file where it absolutely should be. There are countless tools that we use, and we'll talk about some of them here in a few slides, that work directly with a syslog, and they don't work because they don't work with dblog, because that would be Drupal mediating that. It's kind of ugly. Another general tip: evaluate all aspects of your system for what data should be logged. You guys should be asking, okay, I have this site, it has these features. What are the things that people do on the site? What type of information do I need to be logging to make sure I'm capturing all of these actions correctly? And log as much data as possible. Log all the things, all of it. Okay, the site audit module. So in a generic problem, and there's a couple different things. Can your system be scanned and evaluated for general best practices? These are not just security things. This is literally you scanning your Drupal site and it telling you, hey, are you aware that most people do this? You have it set to this. How do you feel about that? It's going to give you some general recommendations. But it's not... It doesn't necessarily impact security. It's more broad. So the nice thing about the site audit module is that it stores historical reports. So the great thing is, if you run it once and then you make some fixes and you run it again, you should see a marked improvement between A and B. And over time, you can continue to compare how you are improving with respect to what this module reports on. And because this is a contributed module, things are always changing. They'll learn more best practices that'll get rolled in to the module. Security review. Same exact idea, except it is for security. This is just the problem of security here. And it also has reports, and that you could generate and maintain that over time, so you can see history. And these are not magic solutions. Like, these are not meant to say that every single thing that gets reported in these tools are going to be perfect for your use case. They're considerations, just to be very clear on that. And I'm actually working on a plugin system for this module because right now it doesn't have one. So that's one piece that I've been working on for quite some time. It's required a lot of refactoring to get the plugin system so that anybody could write their own custom rules that they want for security review. And that's really good for agencies like the government, that have very specific requirements that they want to meet and need, and that does change system by system. Cool. Login history. So this one is probably the #1 thing that you want to do if you're auditing user activity. This one tracks when users log in, how they logged in, what IP address they came from, anything under the sun that has to do with logging in, and super, super useful for tracking a bunch of data of your users and how they get into the system. All right, let's take a look at some authentication stuff. You can prevent attacks by making it harder for users to log in. I know. I'll get shot later. It's okay. So the approaches may and will very likely inconvenience your users, but you need to kind of put a little bit of the fear of God. There are millions upon billions of dollars that some larger companies have spent because they haven't done these types of things to try to come out of a hack or a big data leak or something. Trust me, you don't want the consequence, and I think your users would understand that. This is kind of how I envision users whenever you try to restrict what they do, and it's like you see them walking on the moon and they can barely breathe or walk around. They're kind of like, I'm so uncomfortable. And I love the whole comment about who did the usability testing. Perfect, right? So let's take a look at some Drupal solutions here that we can use. First and foremost, the TFA module. This is one that I worked on with a Google Summer of Code student. We ported it from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. The problem that's being solved is how can I add one additional verification step that allows me to verify that the user is who they say they are. Solution, two-factor authentication adds that second step, and because it provides a second factor to making sure that the users have to go through another step to do their thing. The TFA module itself is an API, so the brilliant part about it is there's a plugin system that doesn't assume what the second factor is. So if you want to develop your own second factor, you have the ability to do so, and through the plugin system. And so what's one example of a plugin that we developed for TFA as part of the Google Summer of Code program? The Google Authenticator module. These handy little devices that sit in your pocket, you can install the Google Authenticator app. It gives you a nice handy code, and that Google Authenticator module works with TFA to add a second step that's driven on the code that's in your pocket. Fancy. Simple SAML PHP auth. If you have single sign-on in your organization, most likely it works with the Simple SAML framework. So what that allows is for you to have, you can replace Drupal's core login with something that is a part of your enterprise. And so that's nice and handy. And you basically install the module, and this module leverages a third-party library that is called Simple SAML PHP, and that is brought in with Composer. So yes, it does help with security, doesn't it? Brilliant idea. Password policy. This was the first Drupal 8 module that I ported. It's like my little special niche in the world that I love. And it also is extremely, the problem that this solved, may seem naive on the surface. But man, was this a hard module to port. Holy crap. All right, so problem number 1. How can I force my users to have strong passwords? Right? Problem number 2, how can I force users to reset their passwords after a duration of time? So that's what this module does. And again, you're starting to see a trend here. There's a plugin system that was developed to provide an API for any other module who has very specific password criteria to extend what is in this module and work with the password policy features. Cool. One example of that is something called the password strength module. This is a case that your users actually might be happy with you, maybe. This is there's an external library, I think it was developed by Twitter, or I always forget this, called XCVBN. Has anybody heard of this? No? Okay. This provides a score from 1 to 5 rating a password, and it is based on entropy. So it takes a ton of different factors, from how many special characters to the cases to the length of the password, all like tons. And it gives you a score from 1 to 5 based on all of those factors. So this actually simplifies what a user needs to do, because all they have to do is get a score that you set. If you want your users to hit a score of higher than 3, well, it's easy. They're going to just keep typing a more difficult password until they hit that, right? It's much different than having 70 different rules that they need to follow that they otherwise will hate their lives. All right. So this module, password strength, extends the password policy module and gives you a criteria for just using the scoring system. And then you can create roles like make my scores higher than 3 or make my scores higher than 5. Well, you can't do that. That would be fun. All right, so encryption. Let's look at that. Encryption starts by looking both at data at rest and the communication channels. This is not just securing your database. You can't just encrypt that data. There's way more going on here. And there are many different encryption-based solutions that affect your entire stack of your application, not just your Drupal system, but your infrastructure, your database layer, your caching layers, your reverse proxies, your CDNs, all of it, right? And everything even down to your servers. Whew. Let's take a look. Some general tips. My security, or my master's advisor would be very proud of me on this slide. The lower level that you secure your infrastructure, it trickles up, right? So the rest of the tiers of your infrastructure receive that because it's low. So if you secure your infrastructure as a first and foremost thing, that often locks down a bunch of attack vectors that the Drupal system does not need to worry about, which is awesome, right? So always start with your infrastructure and then work your way up, because it's going to trickle up. You want that. Always use full HTTPS and SSL for all web traffic. This is about the channel. You want your channel to be encrypted. Users love the little lock on the screen. Conventional logic used to be, oh, I only want to lock down my login forms. I want to lock down my payment forms. No. Turn it on. Make it global. Everybody's happy. They know that they're communicating with you in a secure way. It doesn't matter if they're entering data or not. Just do it. It's actually easy to do, too. So it's a lot harder to do it path by path, and that doesn't help whenever you have changes, if you're doing any development. Oops. One last point here. Evaluate full disk encryption from your hosting or cloud provider. This is like one of the easiest things, I think, that like people just totally overlook. You can lock down your entire web infrastructure from the cloud just by turning on encryption. That makes it easy. All right, so let's look at some contrib modules. Developed one called Key. I need a secure way to manage my system and API keys. Solution, the Key provides an API via plugin system, seeing a trend here, that gives you a bunch of common options for storing and retrieving system keys. Really great, because if you want to change the storage to something else, you can build a plugin that says, I want to use this type of storage. It might be more secure for your environment, and you can do that by just developing a plugin. Cool. Encrypt. I need a way to encrypt Drupal application data. So suppose you're using, $15 a month GoDaddy hosting. For the love of God, please don't do that. That's kind of not cool. But maybe you do need to encrypt your Drupal data. Okay. So the encrypt module provides only an API for performing encryption and decryption operations, It has plugin systems for selecting and extending the different algorithms that you may want to use. And it is just a general purpose way that you can handle encryption in a very standard way. And many different modules use this as a base. So what am I referring to? You can extend different algorithms with the Real AES module or the Diffuse module. That's a library that is open source. We pull it in with Composer. So that's extending the algorithm. By the way, for folks that are classical PHP developers, the mcrypt library was in earlier versions of PHP, no longer in 7. You need to find something better. So a tool like this works. It's no longer maintained, the mcrypt stuff. Just keep that in mind. So what about your data? Like, how do I, if encrypt is just an API and it's not really doing anything except for providing a service to me to do the encryption or decryption, how do I actually manage that? Tools like field encrypt and file encrypt, depending on your use case, gives you the opportunity to encrypt all entities in Drupal 8. Everything's an entity, so that's more useful than what it would be in 7. And then you have file encrypt if you want to do encryption of specific file content, things like PDF uploads and whatnot. And the really great thing about file encrypt in Drupal 7 or Drupal 8, excuse me, is we now support streaming. Boom. You have big giant files, and you have to sit there and wait on a server to encrypt it. That can take hours. Streaming optimizes it on the fly, does it in batches, and stores that, so it's super fast. Now the algorithm needs to support streaming. I'm just letting you know that. And then we do have specific use cases like PubKey Encrypt, and this was another Google Summer Code project. This PubKey Encrypt project is based on OwnCloud. Has anybody heard of OwnCloud? It's an open source project in the world. So they have their way of encrypting certain type of user information in the system. We've built a module in Drupal 8 that does exactly that. Cool. Live long and prosper. We have a guy on our team that just loves cats, and I swear one of these days he's going to see this presentation and be thrilled with me. DevOps. Okay. Your DevOps processes are critical for making sure that your security is proactively maintained. You guys will be learning things about your site or your system, and you want to have the tools and the processes and the right frame of mind to be able to take the things that you learn and apply them in a legitimate way for now and forever. So what are some general tips? Okay, make sure you're using code repositories for the love of God, and have people reviewing the code that is getting pushed into your system. Do pull requests, do code reviews, and especially with the Drupal community, a lot of the contributed and core code has already been reviewed by thousands and thousands of people. You don't need to spend a lot of time reviewing that code. What you need to be spending time reviewing is when you write custom code that extends it. Pay all of your careful scrutiny to that. And if you do catch some flaw in core or contrib, please, for the love of God, give it back. Let them know, right? Because they certainly would want to make sure that their modules are secure and that they're doing things the right way. I speak from experience. And I screw stuff up all the time too. I'm human. Tag your releases in your code repository to help isolate these changes, right? So like, you want to make sure that your changes are as small as humanly possible. And then when you revert back certain tags, you're only reverting back small bits of information or small bits of code to then go and make sure you're isolating changes effectively. Right? It's really critical. And make sure you're updating your code regularly, because people like me, we are all the time evolving our modules. Core is evolving all the time. Make sure you're bringing that code in. I guarantee you they have security things that are advantageous for security. So do it on a regular basis. Don't let it go for 6 to 8 months and then you find yourself with a big mountain of code updates that you need to do. That's just not cool. All right, general tips. Automate, 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 automate. Automation is like, the gold star of DevOps. If you have tools that you can do for performing automation, that is the #1 way that you can proactively make sure that you are applying your continuous learning principles. And you have some great tools in the Drupal space to help do this. Things like Drush and Jenkins, which isn't directly tied to Drupal. And there's tons that come out every day. Travis CI, CodeShip, Circle CI. I could go on for 20 more minutes. I shouldn't. But again, the key point, automation. Just do it, man. Just do it. Okay? So what are the types of tools that Drupal also offers? We talked about Drush a little bit, but what are some other things that we could consider to help with CI and DevOps and all this stuff? The coder module, I want to scan my code for a set of best practices. Again, not directly related to security, but you're making sure. I always tell this story. People love it. If you don't really care to observe any of the PHP CS standards that people in the community support, and you've got someone that's just hacking away and they're not putting comments in their code and they're not doing stuff, what happens if someone has to come in and help fix that? How are they going to feel if they're not observing the standards? Yeah, bad smells are bad for business, right? Same thing, right? And if you're going to be paying someone, if you have a big freaking security breach, and you're going to be paying someone to come in and try to fix your system, guess what? You want this done. Because I'm not touching your code if it's one big hodgepodge glob. I don't like it. So make sure you're using Coder, and Coder ships with the rules that plugs into the PHPCS open source project, and those rules will scan your Drupal site for the rules that were included by the Drupal community for the best practices. So you submit a pull request, you fire off your CI system, and you run PHPCS with the rule. Easy. Hacked module. I want to make sure that my core and contrib projects have not been tampered with. Right? That's a big no-no. So the solution is the hack project does a scan, uses checksums, I believe, to go through and basically make sure that all of your system, all the code that's in your system, is exactly what it should be with what is found on Drupal.org. Drupal has APIs that allow you to extend it. That usually happens in other custom modules, right? Do it that way. Don't hack the code. Backup and migrate. So in terms of a DevOps and CI approach, you want to make sure that you do maintain backups of your site. You want to make sure that if your site goes down, you have the ability to bring it back up very quickly. Most cloud providers and hosting providers do this for their customers. They will back up the site, the code, everything, the database. And so this solution may not apply to you. If you do not have the good fortune of having these tools available to you, this may be something that you want. And backup and migrate allows you to run regular backups. It can be fired with cron as well. And it can basically restore your system to a known good state if your system becomes compromised. Environment. Let's take a look at what we do with a Drupal environment. Securing your infrastructure is equally as important as securing your Drupal system. I think that's the 5th time I've said that, but it's worth repeating. There are many different solutions that can mitigate attacks long before the Drupal system is even bootstrapped, if you can restrict things from the infrastructure. Very cool. So what are some general tips? First and foremost, leverage a multi-environment code workflow. You should never be pushing things directly to prod. Stuff needs to be tested, stuff needs to be code reviewed. That should be going through a dev environment, probably tested by the client on a staging environment, or going to production. I gave another talk on Tuesday about modern DevOps. You can extend the multi-environment workflow by using tools like containers, Dockers, Kubernetes, all of these fun new tools that you can go and basically spin up an environment for every change that you make. And if you do that, you're isolating the changes down and have an environment to test before it ever gets rolled into your code base and it ever gets launched to production. So that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll give that talk next year. Definitely make sure that you're using a CDN, because CDNs are great. They are like a mediation point to serve as like a web application firewall before your infrastructure ever gets communicated with in the Drupal space, right? So CDN is great, and a lot of them have security-specific features. I was sat in a presentation a couple days ago or yesterday about Akamai. Someone was presenting about that, and they talked about how this was in the Python space, about the different ways that he configured that to be not only more secure, but it is a mediation point, right? You can do so many cool things with the CDN long before your Drupal system ever gets even tapped into. And then this one is really fun, and maybe I should just turn it over to Mark here. But if you are writing things to the syslog, you can use tools like Splunk and Elk to do log analysis, right? If you have a big high traffic site, you can use these tools to give you reports and metrics and nice data dashboards to see exactly who is doing what, who's hitting up your site, if they're trying to run cross-site scripting requests, any number of different things. You can generate reports that audit your log, audit your traffic, pull in your analytics, do all these crazy things, and then report on them in very, very human-friendly ways. You could see stuff. I love it. A couple more general tips. Make sure you're leveraging cloud environments. Like if you have a choice of hosting and you're not, being, dictated to by some higher authority, you just take advantage of the cloud. I mean, there's so much stuff going on there, and a lot of it is security related, but there's so many architectural advantages as well, both like in the scaling and the elasticity of a cloud, that are just way worth it. Have a failover environment as well, and if you're doing cloud, you could have a failover region. In case one region goes down, you could switch it, fail it over to another. And then make sure you test your backup and failover plans. Like, I think this is probably the most common sense one, but people don't do it. I don't know why. Like, tell your users you're going to take the site down for 20 minutes, run a backup, restore it. Just make sure it works. Because if you have all this beautiful automation and it's all in place and it doesn't work, it still fails, right? Couple acknowledgements. First and foremost, Civic Actions. What an awesome place to be and work for as a professional. They're founded on 3 principles: open, agile, and open, agile, and what's the third one? Because I screwed it up in my notes. Yeah, sorry, he wasn't prepared for this. But the big thing with Civic Actions is, we're founded on continuous learning principles. We do all of our projects are agile. We are founded on openness. We want to be transparent with people. We want to be giving to open source communities, right? We're very, very open. And we do digital services. So we build Drupal sites. We build cloud infrastructures. We do DevOps solutions. And we do a lot of work in the government with security and everything like that as well. I want to thank the Drupal community, because a lot of these tools that we talk about here and the innovations and the problems that were solved were not possible without these people who do this most of the time on a volunteer basis. Nerd Summit, I want to thank all of you who sat through this talk, the organizers and the presenters. And just again, another call out to Peter Willanen. He's a great security person, great security mind in our community. We truly are standing on the shoulder of giants here in this community and space. A lot of great work that we're doing. It's very innovative and awesome. I want to thank all of you, and I will take questions that you have.